Commander HFY of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet stared at the readings on his primary display, his four eyes blinking in sequence as his mind struggled to process what his sensors were telling him. The ship hanging motionless at the edge of their system defied every law of physics he understood. It was massive, easily the size of a Galactic Council dreadnought, but its construction made no sense. Where Council ships were sleek curves of energy-resistant alloys, this vessel looked like it had been assembled from scrap metal and held together by sheer stubbornness. Massive plates of different materials were welded together in patterns that hurt to look at, and sections of the hull showed clear signs of battle damage that had been repaired with whatever was available. Sir, his tactical officer, Vreen, spoke in the clicking language of their species. The ship's power signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's generating massive amounts of energy, but using technology that appears to be at least 200 cycles behind our current standards. In his 3 decades of service, he had never encountered anything like this. The ship had simply appeared at the system's edge without warning, dropping out of what his sensors insisted was impossible faster-than-light travel using technology that shouldn't work. "What about weapons?" he asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Vreen's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress. "That's what's troubling, sir. We can detect massive kinetic weapon systems, electromagnetic pulse generators, and what appears to be nuclear weaponry." "Nuclear, sir? Who still uses nuclear weapons?" The commander's breathing spiracles fluttered. Nuclear weapons were considered primitive by galactic standards, banned by the Council not for their destructive power, but because they were seen as barbarically crude. No civilized species had used such weapons in over 1,000 cycles. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Put it through," the HFY ordered, straightening his posture in his command chair. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that made HFY's blood run cold. The creature on the screen was clearly not Zephyrian, not Alterian, not any of the known Council species. It was bipedal, covered in what appeared to be synthetic materials rather than natural scales or chitin. Its face was a disturbing combination of soft flesh and hard bone structure, with 2 forward-facing eyes that seemed to see everything at once. But what truly unsettled the commander was the creature's expression. It was calm, almost friendly, but underneath that casual demeanor was something that made every instinct ZYXI possess scream danger. "Greetings," the creature said in heavily accented galactic standard. "I'm Captain Sarah Chun of the U.S. Defiance. We're explorers from a place called Earth, and we're looking for the local government to establish diplomatic contact." The silence on the Zephyrian bridge stretched for long moments. ZYXI had studied xenobiology extensively during his military training, and he had never seen anything like this creature. More disturbing was the fact that it seemed completely at ease, sitting in what appeared to be a command chair, surrounded by technology that looked both primitive and somehow more functional than Zephyrian equipment. "I am Commander ZYXI of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet," he finally responded. "Your species is unknown to us. Please transmit your credentials and authorization for travel through this system." The creature called Chun smiled, an expression that revealed white bone structures that were clearly meant for tearing food. "I'm afraid we don't have any credentials you'd recognize. We're not from around here, and this is our first contact with your civilization. We come in peace, but we're prepared to defend ourselves if necessary." Vreen leaned close to his commander. "Sir, their ship is powering up additional systems. Energy readings are climbing beyond anything we've ever recorded." ZYXI felt his protective shell instinctively tightening. "Captain Chun, you are in violation of Zephyrian space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for inspection." The human's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind those alien eyes. "Commander, I think there might be a misunderstanding. We're not looking for trouble, but we're also not going to be boarded by anyone. We've had some bad experiences with that kind of thing. You will comply or face the consequences," ZYXI stated, following standard protocol. You are outnumbered 50-1. Chun leaned back in her chair and actually laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both pleasant and terrifying. Commander, you seem like a reasonable person, so I'm going to explain something to you. We've been traveling through space for over 200 years, fighting everything from pirates to ancient war machines left behind by dead civilizations. We've learned a lot about surviving in hostile territory. She gestured to someone off-screen, and the view shifted to show what was clearly the bridge of their ship. ZYX's 4 eyes widened as he took in the details. The crew was entirely composed of the same species as Chun, all wearing the same strange synthetic materials, all moving with a casual efficiency that spoke of long experience working together. But what caught his attention was the weapon system's displays visible in the background. His military training allowed him to interpret some of what he was seeing, and it made no sense. The ship appeared to be carrying enough firepower to level a small moon, all of it based on technology that should have been obsolete. The thing is, Chun continued, we found that most civilizations in the galaxy make the same mistake. They assume that newer technology is automatically better. They think that energy weapons are superior to kinetic ones, that shield can stop anything, that bigger ships always win. Her smile became sharper. We've learned differently. Sometimes the old ways work better. Sometimes simple is more reliable than complex. And sometimes when you've been fighting for your survival for long enough, you learn tricks that others never think of. ZYX's tactical officer was frantically working at his station, and the readings he was getting made his breathing spiracles flutter in alarm. Sir, they're not just powering up weapons. They're doing something to local space itself. I'm reading gravitational anomalies around their ship. What kind of anomalies? The commander demanded. I don't know, sir. Nothing in our databases matches what they're doing. On the screen, Chun seemed to notice their distress. Commander, I'm going to make this simple for you. We didn't come here to fight, and we prefer not to, but we're not going anywhere, and we're not submitting to any boarding parties. What we're going to do is wait here until someone with real authority shows up to talk to us. I have authority in this system, ZYXI insisted. You have local authority, Chun corrected. But, unless I'm mistaken, you're part of something larger. Some kind of council or federation. That's what we want to talk to. The human captain's casual confidence was more unnerving than any direct threat could have been. ZYXI had dealt with pirates, raiders, and even rogue military units, but they all followed predictable patterns. They either blustered with obvious bravado or tried to negotiate from positions of obvious weakness. This Chin creature did neither. She simply stated facts as if the outcome was already decided in her favor. Sir, Vreen whispered, long-range scanners are detecting more ships approaching from the outer system. They're using the same impossible FTL technology as the first vessel. ZYXI's world suddenly became much more complicated. How many? 3 more, sir. No, wait. 5. They're appearing faster than our scanners can track them. Chen's expression shifted slightly, and she touched something on her command chair. Ah, looks like my escort is arriving. Don't worry, Commander. They're just here to make sure our conversation doesn't get interrupted. The tactical display showed 5 more vessels materializing around the first ship, each one as impossible as the original. They were different sizes and configurations, but all shared the same patchwork construction and massive energy signatures. This is Admiral Victoria Reyes aboard the UES Retribution, a new voice cut into the communication channel. The screen split to show another human, this one clearly older and wearing more elaborate clothing. Captain Chun, what's the situation? Standard first contact, Admiral. Local Defense Force is being cautious, which is smart. I've explained that we want to talk to their higher-ups. Admiral Reyes nodded and turned to face ZYXI directly. Commander, I understand your position. You've got unknown ships in your space, and you need to protect your people. That's exactly what I'd do in your situation. The Admiral's tone was respectful, but carried an undertone of absolute authority that made ZYXI's instincts scream warnings. This was not a creature to be underestimated. What I'm going to suggest, Reyes continued, is that you contact your superiors and let them know that humanity has arrived in this part of the galaxy. We're looking for formal diplomatic relations, trade opportunities, and mutual defense agreements. Mutual defense? ZYXI couldn't help but ask. Reyes smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be warm and predatory at the same time. Commander, the galaxy is a dangerous place. There are things out there in the dark that would surprise you. We've been dealing with them for a long time, and we've gotten pretty good at it. Vreen's mandibles were clicking rapidly as he processed new sensor data. Sir, I'm reading massive energy spikes from all 6 human vessels. They're synchronizing some kind of field generators. What are they doing? ZYXI demanded. Unknown, sir, but the energy output is beyond anything we've ever recorded. On the screen, Admiral Reyes seemed to notice their distress. Don't worry, Commander. We're just making sure we don't get any uninvited guests while we're talking. There are some things that follow ship signatures through FTL, and we've learned to be cautious about them. The space around the human ships began to shimmer, as if reality itself was being bent. ZYXI's sensors screamed warnings about gravitational anomalies, spatial distortions, and energy fields that existed beyond the normal spectrum. Commander, his science officer called out, her voice tight with fear. They're generating some kind of interdiction field. Nothing can enter or leave this area of space while it's active. But, sir, Vreen added, his tactical training evident in his analysis. The energy requirement for something like that should be impossible. They'd need the power output of a star to maintain that kind of field. Admiral Reyes chuckled, a sound that made ZYXI's shell tighten. You're not wrong, son. We had to get creative about power generation. Amazing what you can accomplish when your survival depends on it. The human leaned forward in her chair. Commander ZYXI, I'm going to be straight with you. We're not here to conquer anybody or destroy anything. We spent the last 2 centuries fighting things that would give your worst nightmares bad dreams. All we want is a place to rest, refit, and maybe find some allies who understand that sometimes you need to hit back harder than you got hit. But understand this. Her voice became harder. We've learned that the universe doesn't respect weakness. Everything out there that wants to hurt you will keep trying until you prove that hurting you costs more than it's worth. We become very good at making that point clear. ZYXI found himself in a position no Zephyrian commander had ever faced. These creatures claimed to be explorers seeking peaceful contact, but everything about them screamed of barely controlled violence. Their technology was primitive, yet somehow superior to his own. Their ships looked like they'd been built in a scrapyard, but could generate power fields that bent space itself. And their casual confidence suggested they'd faced far worse than anything his fleet could threaten them with. I will contact the Council, he finally said, knowing it was the only option that might prevent a disaster he was completely unprepared for. Captain Chun smiled again. Thank you, Commander. We'll wait right here. Take all the time you need. As ZYXI began composing his report to the Galactic Council, he wondered if his people were prepared for what humanity represented. These creatures had introduced themselves as explorers seeking peace, but everything about them suggested they were something far more dangerous. They were survivors, and survivors, by definition, were the ones who had already proven they could destroy whatever threatened them. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Grand Chamber on Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the political heart of their civilization. Representatives from 47 species gathered around the circular amphitheater, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, electronic tones, and telepathic emanations. Counselor Prime Yaxtoen of the Altarian hegemony called the session to order with a gesture of his 6-fingered hands. His people had led the council for over 800 cycles, their advanced technology and diplomatic skills making them natural leaders in galactic affairs. We have received a disturbing report from the Zephyrian system, Yaxtoen announced, his melodious voice automatically translated for species that couldn't interpret Altarian vocal patterns. Commander ZYXI claims to have encountered ships belonging to an unknown species calling themselves humans. A ripple of various forms of laughter passed through the assembly. The Torgon representative made a sound like grinding stone, while the gaseous, ethereal delegate's communication field flickered in patterns that indicated amusement. Humans. Councillor Vextar of the Torgon Empire spoke, his massive crystalline form catching the chamber's light. The mythical species from the Outer Rim stories? Commander HFY has been in deep space too long if he's seeing fairy tales. The report is quite detailed, Yaxtoen continued, though his tone suggested he shared the general skepticism. According to HFY, these alleged humans possess technology that defies our understanding of physics, while simultaneously appearing primitive by our standards. Dr. Kellenshaw, the Council's chief xenobiologist, floated forward on her anti-gravity platform. Her Zephyrian heritage made her the most qualified to analyze reports from her homeworld. Counselors, I have examined Commander HFY's sensor logs and testimony. While I cannot explain everything he reported, I can confirm that something unprecedented occurred in that system. The murmur of conversation died as the serious nature of her tone registered across multiple species. The gravitational anomalies alone suggest technology we don't possess, she continued. The energy readings are beyond anything in our databases. Either Commander HFY has discovered a completely unknown civilization, or he has encountered something pretending to be one. Councillor Thrix of the Hive Collective spoke through the Chamber's communication system, her species' individual voice patterns merging into one coherent statement. The collective has analyzed the data. The probability that this is an elaborate deception is 47.3%. The probability that it represents a genuine first contact with an unknown species is 31.2%. The probability that it represents something else entirely is 21.5%. What would constitute something else entirely? Asked the representative from the Quantum Confederacy, his form shifting between visible states as he spoke. Ancient technology awakening. Artifacts from the predecessor civilizations. Or entities from beyond our dimensional framework. The Hive answered with their characteristic directness. Yaxtoen gestured for attention. Regardless of what these things actually are, we must respond appropriately. I propose sending a standard first contact delegation to assess the situation and determine appropriate action. With respect, Counselor Prime, Dr. Kellenshaw interjected, I recommend extreme caution. If even half of what Commander HFY reported is accurate, we may be dealing with a civilization that poses significant unknown capabilities. The ethereal delegate's communication field pulsed urgently. The ethereals concur with the Zephyrian scientist. These entities demonstrated power manipulation beyond our theoretical frameworks. Standard protocols may be insufficient, but Councillor Vextar's crystal form resonated with dismissive harmonics. We are allowing primitive fear to override rational analysis. No species achieves space travel while retaining nuclear weapons technology. No civilization develops gravitational manipulation while using kinetic projectile weapons. The reports describe impossibilities. Therefore, they must be fabricated or misinterpreted, agreed the representative from the Tech Union, his cybernetic implants glowing as he processed the data. We should investigate, but with the assumption that we will find either a hoax or misidentified natural phenomena. Admiral Corvash of the Council Defense Fleet stood from his position. The grizzled Altarian had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never faced a threat he couldn't overcome. I volunteer to lead the contact mission, he announced. My flagship Harmony's Edge can handle any contingency. If these are genuine aliens, we'll make proper first contact. If they're hostile, we'll demonstrate the consequences of threatening Council space. Admiral Dr. Kellenshaw tried again. The energy reading suggests. Dr. Corvash interrupted. I've been fighting hostile aliens since before you were spawned. Energy readings can be faked. Sensor ghosts can be projected. But actual combat capability? That's harder to counterfeit. The vote was swift and predictable. Despite the warnings from the few scientists who had actually analyzed the data, the Council's politicians and military leaders chose to treat the human contact as a routine first contact situation with potentially hostile unknowns. 3 hours later, Admiral Corvash stood on the bridge of his flagship as it dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Zephyrian system. The Harmony's Edge was the pride of the Council fleet, a kilometer-long vessel equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems their civilization could produce. Admiral, his tactical officer, reported, "Sensors are detecting the Zephyrian fleet maintaining position near the system's 4th planet. And, sir, there are 6 unknown vessels in formation with them." Corvash studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The ships looked exactly as described in ZYXI's report. Massive, ugly, and assembled for what appeared to be scrap metal. But his sensors confirmed the energy readings that had seemed so impossible in the written reports. "How are they generating that much power?" he asked his science officer. "Unknown, sir. The technology appears to be based on principles we don't recognize." "Sir," communications called out, "we're receiving a transmission from one of the unknown vessels." "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of what was presumably the lead human ship. Admiral Corvash found himself looking at creatures that matched the descriptions, but somehow seemed even more unsettling in person. They were all roughly the same size and basic configuration, but their individual variations suggested a species that had adapted to multiple different environments. Some were darker, some lighter. Some were larger and more muscular, others smaller and more compact. All of them moved with the casual efficiency of predators, completely comfortable in their environment. The one who spoke was clearly the leader, an older human with short gray hair and scars that suggested extensive combat experience. "I'm Admiral Victoria Reyes, commanding the Human Expeditionary Fleet. You must be the Council response team we were told to expect." Corvash straightened in his command chair, drawing on decades of diplomatic and military experience. "I am Admiral Corvash of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet. I'm here to conduct formal first contact protocols and assess the situation in this system." Admiral Reyes nodded respectfully. "We appreciate the formal approach, Admiral. We've been waiting for proper authorities to arrive." "I understand you claim to be explorers from a distant region called Earth," Corvash began, following standard first contact procedures. "That's correct. We're members of the United Earth Space Forces, representing a coalition of human governments. We've been exploring this region of the galaxy for several months now." The casual way she said it sent a chill through Corvash's bridge crew. Several months meant they had been operating in Council space without detection for an extended period. During this exploration, Corvash continued carefully, "Have you encountered other civilizations?" Reyes exchanged glances with her crew, and Corvash caught something in that silent communication that made his protective scales tighten. "Admiral, we've encountered quite a few civilizations during our travels. Unfortunately, not all of those encounters have been friendly." "Could you elaborate?" The human admiral leaned back at her chair. "The galaxy is apparently full of species that shoot first and ask questions later. We've had to defend ourselves against pirates, slavers, and some kind of religious fanatics who seemed to think we were demons or something." She gestured to someone off-screen, and the view shifted to show what was clearly a weapons control station. Corvash's military training allowed him to interpret some of the displays, and what he saw made no sense. "The thing is, Admiral, we've learned that peaceful exploration requires being prepared for non-peaceful responses. Our ships are designed for extended operations in hostile territory. Your weapons systems appear to be based on primitive technology," Corvash observed, trying to understand what he was seeing. Reyes smiled, an expression that reminded him uncomfortably of pictures he'd seen of extinct predator species. "Admiral, there's nothing primitive about a 50-kilogram tungsten slug traveling at 12 kilometers per second. Physics doesn't care how advanced your civilization is. But energy weapons are more efficient. Energy weapons require exotic materials, sophisticated focusing systems, and massive power cores that can fail, Reyes interrupted. A kinetic weapon requires metal and velocity. Much simpler to maintain, harder to defend against, and absolutely devastating when it hits. Corvash's tactical officer was frantically analyzing the human ships, and his reports were becoming increasingly alarming. Admiral, their vessels appear to be carrying enough kinetic ammunition to level a planet, and their armor isn't energy-dispersive plating like ours. It's just thick metal, but there's so much of it that our weapons might not penetrate. Surely you're not suggesting that primitive armor could stop Council weapons? Corvash demanded. His science officer checked his readings again. Sir, their armor plating appears to be nearly 2 meters thick in some places. It's not sophisticated, but the mass alone would absorb tremendous amounts of energy. On screen, Admiral Reyes seemed to follow their conversation despite the fact that they weren't broadcasting it. Admiral Corvash, would you like a demonstration of how our technology works? We'd be happy to show you what we can do. Every instinct Corvash possessed screamed danger at the casual way she made the offer. What kind of demonstration? Well, your sensors have probably detected that asteroid field about 10 million kilometers from here. We could show you how our weapons perform against actual targets. Corvash looked at his tactical display. The asteroid field she mentioned was composed of rocks ranging from a few meters to several kilometers in diameter. It would take his ship's weapons several focus volleys to destroy one of the larger asteroids. Very well. Please proceed. Admiral Reyes turned to someone off-screen and spoke briefly. A moment later, Corvash's sensors detected massive energy spikes from all 6 human ships. Firing solution confirmed. Came a voice from the human ship's audio pickup. Multiple target lock acquired. Guns free. The human ships fired simultaneously, but there were no energy beams or plasma bolts visible on Corvash's screens. Instead, his sensors simply registered 6 massive kinetic projectiles traveling at velocities that shouldn't have been possible. 12 seconds later, the asteroid field ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not broken apart, simply gone, converted into an expanding cloud of superheated gas and microscopic debris. The silence on Corvash's bridge stretched for long minutes as his crew processed what they had just witnessed. Admiral, his weapons officer finally, whispered, to achieve that level of destruction with energy weapons would require the combined firepower of our entire fleet. And they accomplished it with 6 ships firing what appeared to be simple projectiles, his science officer added. On the screen, Admiral Reyes was watching their reactions with obvious interest. Admiral Corvash, is there anything else you'd like to know about human military capabilities? The Altarian Admiral found himself in a situation no Council officer had ever faced. These creatures possessed technology that was simultaneously primitive and devastatingly superior to anything his civilization had developed. They spoke of peace while casually demonstrating the ability to destroy entire star systems. Admiral Reyes, he said carefully, what exactly do you want? The human's expression became serious. What we want, Admiral, is very simple. We want to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. We want to open trade negotiations for materials and technologies that could benefit both our civilizations. And we want to discuss mutual defense agreements. Mutual defense against what? Reyes leaned forward in her chair. Admiral, how long has your civilization controlled this region of space? The Council has maintained peace in this sector for over 3,000 years, Corvash replied proudly. 3,000 years of peace, Reyes mused. That's impressive, but I'm curious about something. During those 3,000 years, have you ever encountered anything that your technology couldn't handle? Any threats that required you to adapt or evolve your defensive capabilities? Corvash considered the question. There have been occasional pirate activities, resource disputes between member species, and some minor conflicts with non-council civilizations. Nothing that required significant military innovation. The human admiral nodded thoughtfully. Admiral, we've been traveling through space for only 200 years, but During that time, we've encountered things that would probably surprise you. Ancient war machines left behind by dead civilizations. Entities from parallel dimensions that consider our reality nothing more than a food source. Pirates and slavers who have spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest. Her expression became harder. We've learned that the universe is a hostile place, and the only way to survive is to be more dangerous than anything that wants to hurt you. That's why our ships look like they've been through hell. Because they have been. What are you suggesting? Corvash asked, though part of him already knew. I'm suggesting that your 3,000 years of peace might be coming to an end, Admiral. There are things moving in the dark between the stars that don't care about your diplomatic protocols or your advanced technology. When they arrive, and they will arrive, you're going to need allies who know how to fight. The human fleet hung motionless in space. 6 impossible ships that had just demonstrated they could destroy entire fleets with casual ease. But it was the certainty in Admiral Reyes' voice that truly frightened Corvash. These humans weren't just explorers seeking peaceful contact. They were refugees from a war so terrible that it had taught them to view the Peaceful Council as helpless children who didn't understand how dangerous the galaxy really was. And they were offering to help. The Council's emergency assembly had been in session for 18 hours straight, and the tension in the Great Chamber was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Admiral Corvash's report had shattered the comfortable assumptions that 47 civilizations had built their societies upon for millennia. Counselor Prime Yaxtoan stood at the center of the amphitheater, his normally composed demeanor showing cracks of strain. Around him, representatives argued in dozens of languages and communication methods, their panic barely controlled by diplomatic protocol. Order, Yaxtoan called out, his voice enhanced by the chamber's amplification systems. We must approach this situation rationally. Rationally, Counselor Vexstar's crystalline form resonated with harmonic discord. These creatures just demonstrated they can destroy our fleets with primitive weapons. How do we respond rationally to impossibility? Dr. Kellenshaw floated to the speaker's position, her scientific training evident in her measured approach. Counselors, I have spent the last day analyzing every piece of data we have on the humans. Their technology is not impossible, merely based on principles we have chosen not to pursue. Explain, demanded the ethereal representative, their energy field pulsing with urgency. Our civilizations have spent thousands of cycles developing increasingly sophisticated weapons and defenses. Energy shields, plasma weapons, exotic matter manipulation. We pursued elegance and efficiency. She paused, letting the implications sink in. The humans pursued effectiveness. The chamber's translation systems struggled to convey her next words across all the different species. Their weapons are not advanced. They are perfected. They have taken kinetic energy principles to their absolute theoretical limits, and then found ways to exceed those limits through engineering we never considered necessary. But how? Asked the representative from the tech union, his cybernetic implants flickering as he processed data. Brute force engineering combined with materials science we abandoned as too resource-intensive. Their ships are not elegant because elegance was a luxury they could not afford. Admiral Corvash stepped forward. The question before us is not how they achieve their capabilities, but what we do now that they are here. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's emergency communication system activated. The face of Commander HFY appeared on the main display, but his usual composed expression was replaced by barely controlled terror. Counselors, forgive the interruption, but you need to see this immediately. The humans have just received what they call a priority transmission, and their reaction suggests imminent danger. The view shifted to show the exterior of the human fleet. All 6 ships were moving into what was clearly a combat formation, their previously casual positioning replaced by precise military positioning that spoke of long experience with sudden threats. What kind of transmission? Yuxtun demanded. Unknown, sir, but Admiral Reyes has requested an immediate conference with Council leadership. She says it concerns what she calls mutual defense necessities. Within minutes, the Council's main display was showing Admiral Reyes on the bridge of her ship. But the calm, confident human from previous communications had been replaced by someone who looked like she was preparing for war. "Counselors," Reyes began without preamble, "we've just received word that a harvester fleet has entered this region of the galaxy. Based on their trajectory and known behavior patterns, they'll reach Council space within 6 standard months." The alien word required no translation. The tone in which Reyes spoke, it conveyed meaning that transcended language barriers. This was something that terrified creatures who had just demonstrated the ability to destroy asteroid fields with casual ease. "What," Yaxtoan asked carefully, "is a harvester fleet?" Admiral Reyes looked directly into the camera, and every being in the council chamber felt the weight of her gaze. "Counselors, I think it's time you learned why humanity looks the way we do, and why our ships are built for war instead of exploration." The display shifted to show what appeared to be historical records. The image quality was poor, clearly from much older recording technology, but what it showed made several council members recoil in horror. Earth hung in space, a blue and green world that should have been beautiful. Instead, it was surrounded by massive geometric structures that pulsed with malevolent energy. The planet's surface was scarred with patterns that suggested systematic resource extraction on a global scale. "This is Earth, our homeworld, as it appeared 187 years ago," Reyes narrated. "The structures you see are harvester processing stations. The harvesters are machine intelligence that consumes entire worlds to fuel their expansion across the galaxy." The image changed to show ships rising from Earth's surface. But these were not the massive warships the Council had seen. These were clearly civilian vessels, overloaded with refugees, their hulls barely holding together as they struggled to escape their dying world. "They don't conquer worlds, counselors. They consume them. Every living being, every useful mineral, every molecule of atmospheric gas. When they finish with a planet, what remains is a dead rock floating in empty space." "But you escaped," Dr. Kellenshaw observed. "Some of us escaped," Reyes corrected grimly. "Out of 8 billion humans, maybe 50 million made it off-world before Earth fell completely. We've been fighting a running battle through space for nearly 2 centuries, learning how to survive against an enemy that considers us nothing more than mobile resources to be harvested." The historical images continued, showing massive space battles between human ships and geometric alien vessels. The humans were clearly outmatched, their ships smaller and less sophisticated. But they fought with a desperation and creativity that gradually began to even the odds. "Every piece of technology you've seen from us was developed during that fight," Reyes continued. "Our kinetic weapons exist because harvester armor adapts to energy weapons. Our heavy armor exists because harvester weapons turn sophisticated shields into liabilities. Our power systems exist because when you're fighting for the survival of your entire species, efficiency is less important than raw capability." Counselor Vextar's crystal form resonated with confused harmonics. "If these harvesters are so dangerous, how have we never encountered them?" Admiral Reyes smiled, but it was an expression devoid of humor. "Because we've been leading them away from inhabited systems for 200 years, Counselor. Every time they got close to discovering other civilizations, we hit them hard enough to make them follow us instead." The implications of that statement hit the council chamber like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just been exploring this region of space. They had been deliberately drawing galactic-scale predators away from inhabited worlds, sacrificing their own safety to protect civilizations they had never met. "But now," Reyes continued, "we're tired. Our population is down to maybe 30 million spread across 6 colony ships and a dozen escort vessels. We've lost too many fights and taken too much damage. We can't keep running forever. What are you proposing?" Yaxtoan asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "We're proposing a last stand, counselors. Right here, in council space. We help you prepare for what's coming, and together we make the harvesters pay such a high price for this region that they decide to look elsewhere for easier prey. The silence that followed was broken by the Hive Collective representative. You would risk the destruction of our entire civilization on the possibility that we could damage these harvesters enough to discourage them. Counselor, Reyes replied, the harvesters are already coming. We can either fight them together with some chance of success, or you can face them alone with no chance at all. Dr. Kellenshaw activated her communication system. Admiral, you said your population is 30 million. How many of those are military personnel? All of them, came the immediate reply. When your species is fighting for extinction, everyone learns to fight. Our children train on weapons systems as soon as they can reach the controls. Our elderly serve as tactical advisors until the day they die. Every human alive today is a combat veteran. The enormity of what that meant hit the council representatives in waves. These weren't just refugees who had developed advanced weapons. These were the survivors of a 200-year total war, a population that had been refined by conflict until only the most capable remained. Show us, Admiral Corvash said suddenly. Show us what a harvester fleet looks like. Admiral Reyes nodded to someone off-screen, and the display changed to show long-range sensor data. What the sensors detected defied easy comprehension. The fleet approaching council space was massive beyond anything they had imagined, but its composition made no sense. Those large structures are harvester capital ships, Reyes explained. Each one is roughly the size of a small moon and carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet from orbit. The smaller vessels are drones, but there are usually millions of them per capital ship. Millions. Vexstar's harmonic patterns shifted to frequencies associated with terror. The harvesters don't think like biological creatures, Counselor. They don't worry about casualties or resource expenditure. If they need to sacrifice 10 million drones to destroy one enemy ship, they consider that an acceptable trade ratio. Admiral Corvash studied the sensor data with growing dread. How have you survived against something like this? We learned to think like them, Reyes answered. We stopped worrying about elegant solutions and started focusing on what works. When conventional tactics fail, you try unconventional ones. When those fail, you try impossible ones. She gestured again, and the view showed human ships engaged in what appeared to be suicidal attacks against harvester vessels. But as the council watched, they realized the apparent suicide runs were actually carefully coordinated strikes designed to cause maximum damage with minimal resources. We learned to use their size against them. Large ships are powerful, but they're also slow and inflexible. Small ships are vulnerable, but they're fast and unpredictable. We learned to build ships that could take incredible punishment, hit like meteors, and then disappear before the enemy could respond effectively. But you're still losing, Dr. Kellenshaw observed. We're still alive, Reyes corrected. And we've learned something important about the harvesters. They can be stopped. It requires sacrifice on a scale that most civilizations can't imagine, but it can be done. Council Prime Yaxtun stood slowly. What would this last stand require from the council? Admiral Reyes' expression became grim. Everything, Counselor. Every ship you can build, every weapon you can manufacture, every life you're willing to sacrifice. The harvesters don't understand concepts like partial victory or negotiated surrender. Either we destroy enough of them to make this region too expensive to harvest, or they consume every living thing in council space. And if we refuse, asked the ethereal representative, then, in 6 months, your civilization will become nothing more than raw materials in harvester storage tanks, Reyes replied with brutal honesty. And humanity will find somewhere else to make our final stand. The council chamber fell silent as 47 civilizations contemplated their impossible choice. Alliance with these dangerous, scarred refugees might save them, but it would require transforming their entire society into something designed for total war. How long do we have to decide? Yaxtoan asked. The harvester fleet will be here in 6 months, Reyes answered. But if you're going to fight, we need to start preparing now. Building the weapons you'll need, training your people, fortifying your most important systems. Every day we delay is a day closer to extinction." As the communication ended and the council chamber erupted into debate, one fact became unavoidably clear. The age of peaceful exploration and diplomatic solutions was ending. What was beginning would test whether civilization itself could survive in a universe where the price of existence was eternal vigilance and the willingness to become as dangerous as the threats that hunted in the dark between the stars. 3 months had passed since the Council's reluctant decision to ally with humanity, and the transformation of galactic civilization had been nothing short of catastrophic. Dr. Kellen Shaw stood in what had once been the Nexus Prime Botanical Gardens, now converted into a massive weapons manufacturing facility that operated around the clock. The elegant curves of Alterian architecture had been replaced by the brutal functionality of human engineering principles. Where once peaceful species had strolled among exotic plants from 47 worlds, now production lines churned out kinetic ammunition, armor plating, and weapons systems based on designs that prioritized killing efficiency over aesthetic beauty. The psychological impact on our population continues to escalate, she reported to Admiral Reyes, who was reviewing production schedules while simultaneously coordinating with 17 different military leaders across multiple species. The Torgon Collective reports a 23% increase in stress-related crystalline fractures. The ethereals are experiencing destabilization events that affect their energy cohesion. Admiral Reyes paused her multitasking to focus on the Zephyrian scientist. Over the past 3 months, Kellen Shaw had watched the human commander transform from a tired refugee into something resembling a force of nature. The casual confidence had been replaced by relentless efficiency that seemed to consume everything around it. "Doctor, I understand this is difficult for your people," Reyes said, but her tone carried no sympathy. "But the alternative is extinction. When the harvesters arrive, they won't care about our psychological well-being." Through the facility's windows, they could see the orbital construction yards where the next impossible project was taking shape. What had once been elegant council ships were being stripped down and rebuilt according to human specifications. The graceful curves were replaced by angular armor plating. The sophisticated energy weapon arrays were supplemented with kinetic cannon systems that looked like they belonged on ancient siege weapons. "Admiral," came a voice over the communication system, "General Martinez is reporting from the Torgon system. They need your authorization for the next phase of planetary fortification." Reyes activated a holographic display that showed the Torgon homeworld surrounded by a growing network of defensive installations. But these weren't the energy shields and sensor arrays that traditionally protected important planets. Instead, massive kinetic weapons platforms orbited the world like mechanical moons, their targeting systems locked onto the approach vectors the Harvester fleet would most likely use. "Authorization granted," Reyes said. "Tell Martinez to prioritize the asteroid mining operations. We need more ammunition than the platforms can store." Dr. Kellen Shaw watched as another impossibility became routine. The humans had convinced the mineral-rich Torgon species to literally disassemble their own asteroid belts to create ammunition for weapons that fired projectiles the size of buildings. "Admiral," Kellen Shaw said carefully, "there are reports from the outer systems about resistance to the military transformation. Some species are questioning whether survival at this cost is worth the effort." Admiral Reyes stopped what she was doing and looked directly at the scientist. "Doctor, would you like to see what the cost of not transforming looks like?" Before Kellen Shaw could respond, the holographic display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the advancing Harvester fleet. But this wasn't the distant threat they had been tracking for months. This was detailed intelligence gathered by human reconnaissance ships that had somehow managed to get close to the enemy formation. "This is the Kepler colony," Reyes narrated, as the display showed what appeared to be a thriving solar system. Population approximately 2 billion, spread across 4 planets and dozens of orbital habitats. They received the same warning we sent to the Council 3 months ago. The image shifted to show the same system, but the timestamp indicated it was only 2 weeks old. Whereas civilization had existed, nothing remained but empty space and scattered debris. The planets were gone, consumed down to their cores. Even the system's star appeared dimmer, as if the harvesters had somehow extracted energy from the nuclear fusion itself. They chose not to transform their civilization for war. Reyes continued with brutal matter-of-factness. The harvester fleet processed their entire solar system in 6 days. The silence stretched between them as Kellenshaw processed what she was seeing. She had read the reports about harvester capabilities, but seeing the actual results of their consumption process was different from understanding it intellectually. "How do you maintain hope against something like that?" she asked. Admiral Reyes' smile was sharp as a blade. "We don't maintain hope, Doctor. We maintain anger." The communication system activated again, this time showing Captain Shun from the bridge of the UES Defiance. The human ship was currently docked at the Alterian shipyards, where it was being retrofitted with weapons and systems based on technology shared between human and Council engineering teams. "Admiral, we've got a situation developing in the ethereal cluster. Their representatives are requesting immediate consultation on what they're calling fundamental compatibility issues. Meaning they're pacifists who are having trouble adapting to the concept of total war," Chen replied. "Their entire species has evolved beyond physical aggression. They literally cannot comprehend the mindset required for effective combat." Admiral Reyes cursed in a language that the translation systems couldn't interpret, but the emotional content was clear enough. "Doctor, you're coming with me to the ethereal cluster. We need someone who can explain this in scientific terms they'll understand." 6 hours later, Dr. Kellenshaw found herself aboard a human transport ship traveling at velocities that made her nervous system rebel. Human faster-than-light technology was not designed for passenger comfort. Like everything else about their civilization, it prioritized function over form. The ethereal cluster was a collection of space habitats that existed in perfect harmony with the quantum fields that gave the ethereal species their energy-based existence. The structures were beautiful beyond description, flowing geometric patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But as their ship approached, Kellenshaw could see the problem immediately. The ethereals were trying to adapt to military necessity while maintaining their fundamental nature, and the result was chaos. Their energy fields flickered with patterns that suggested deep psychological distress, and several of the habitats showed signs of partial dimensional displacement. "The issue," explained Coordinator Yexlan, speaking through a translation matrix that converted energy field fluctuations into audible speech, "is that aggression is antithetical to our existence. Our species evolved beyond physical conflict millions of cycles ago. The very concept of intentional harm causes cascade failures in our energy matrices." Admiral Reyes studied the ethereal representative with obvious frustration. "Coordinator, I understand your nature, but the harvesters won't care about your evolutionary achievements. They'll harvest your energy just as efficiently as they harvest solid matter." "We understand the logical necessity," Yexlin replied, "but understanding and implementation are different concepts for energy-based consciousness. We cannot simply decide to become violent. It would be like asking you to decide to exist in 4 dimensions." Dr. Kellenshaw stepped forward, her scientific training helping her see the parameters of the problem. "Coordinator, what if we approach this from a different perspective? Instead of asking you to become aggressive, what if we asked you to become protective?" The ethereal's energy field shifted to patterns indicating thoughtful consideration. "Explain." "Your species has evolved beyond the need for violence because you achieved perfect harmony with your environment," Kellenshaw continued. "But the harvesters represent a disruption to that harmony on a universal scale. Fighting them isn't aggression, it's ecological maintenance." Admiral Reyes caught on immediately. The harvesters are a cancer in the galaxy's ecosystem. Removing them is no different from a healthy organism destroying diseased cells. Coordinator Yexlin's energy patterns shifted again, and suddenly, the chaotic fluctuations in the surrounding habitats began to stabilize. This perspective has possibility. We could reconceptualize military action as universe-scale immune response rather than species-level aggression. Exactly, Dr. Kellenshaw said. You're not learning to kill. You're learning to heal the galaxy by removing a pathological element. Within hours, the ethereal cluster was transformed. The species' incredible mastery of energy manipulation, previously used only for creation and harmony, was turned toward developing weapons that could disrupt harvester systems at the quantum level. Their habitats became focusing arrays for energy weapons that could theoretically destabilize matter at the subatomic scale. That was brilliant, Admiral Reyes said as they traveled back toward the central systems. How did you know that would work? Dr. Kellenshaw settled back in her seat, feeling exhausted by the psychological effort required to communicate with beings of pure energy. Because every species has survival instincts, Admiral. They're just expressed differently depending on the evolutionary path. The ethereals needed to understand that we're not asking them to betray their nature. We're asking them to fulfill it at a higher level. And the others? The species that are still resisting transformation. Each one will require a different approach. The Hive Collective understands efficiency, but struggles with individual initiative. The Quantum Confederacy exists in multiple probability states simultaneously, so they need to see successful outcomes across multiple timeline branches. Admiral Reyes nodded thoughtfully. Doctor, how many species do you think will actually be ready when the harvesters arrive? The question hung in the air between them, like an unexploded bomb. Dr. Kellenshaw had been running calculations for weeks, trying to determine whether the transformed Council forces would be sufficient to mount an effective defense. Honestly, maybe 60% will be militarily useful. Another 20% will provide logistical support. The remaining 20%. She trailed off. The remaining 20% will be liabilities, Reyes finished grimly. Species so committed to their peaceful nature that they'll hinder rather than help our efforts. What happens to them? Admiral Reyes was quiet for a long moment. Doctor, in total war, there are only two categories of beings, those who can fight and those who need protection. The species that can adapt will have to be evacuated to the most heavily defended systems and hope that the rest of us can win without them. As their ship approached Nexus Prime, Dr. Kellenshaw could see the continuing transformation of galactic civilization. The elegant space station was now surrounded by manufacturing platforms, weapons testing ranges, and training facilities where thousands of beings learned the art of warfare that their species had abandoned millennia ago. But, perhaps most significantly, she could see the human colony ships themselves. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was building permanent installations rather than mobile vessels designed for constant flight. They were putting down roots, making a commitment to defend this region of space as if it were their new home. Admiral, she said suddenly, what happens if we win? What do you mean? What happens to galactic civilization after we defeat the harvesters? We've spent 3 months transforming 47 peaceful species into warriors. How do we transform them back? Admiral Reyes was quiet for so long that Dr. Kellenshaw wondered if she had heard the question. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed to encompass the entire tragedy of human history. Doctor, that's a problem for the survivors to solve. Right now, our only job is to make sure there are survivors. As they docked at Nexus Prime, Dr. Kellenshaw realized that humanity hadn't just brought military technology to the Council. They had brought the fundamental understanding that survival sometimes required becoming something you never wanted to be. The question was whether galactic civilization could survive the cure as well as the disease. The Harvester fleet arrived 3 days ahead of schedule. Admiral Victoria Reyes stood on the command deck of Nexus Prime's Transform Command Center, watching as sensors across 12 star systems reported the same impossible readings. The enemy had somehow managed to accelerate their approach without triggering the early warning networks that human and Council forces had spent months establishing. Fleet positions report ready. Admiral, came the voice of General Martinez from his position coordinating the defense of the inner systems. All species report maximum readiness within their operational parameters. Admiral Reyes studied the tactical display that showed the most ambitious defensive strategy ever attempted in galactic history. 47 civilizations had transformed themselves into a military machine designed around a single objective: make the Harvester fleet pay such a devastating price for this region of space that they would seek easier prey elsewhere. The formations were beautiful in their deadly precision. Ethereal energy weapon platforms created focusing nodes that could channel power across multiple star systems. Torgon kinetic artillery installations turned entire asteroid fields into ammunition stockpiles. Alterian command ships coordinated targeting solutions across distances that required faster-than-light communication systems. And, threading through it all, the human ships that had started this transformation. 6 vessels that looked like they had been built from scrap metal, but carried enough firepower to sterilize planets. Dr. Kellenshaw, report on civilian evacuation status. Admiral Reyes ordered. 83% of non-combatant populations have been relocated to the core systems, came the scientist's voice from her coordination station. The remaining 17% either refused evacuation or belong to species that cannot be safely relocated. Admiral Reyes nodded grimly. The species that couldn't be evacuated were primarily energy-based beings like the ethereals, whose existence was tied to specific quantum conditions that couldn't be replicated elsewhere. They would fight where they were or die where they were. Admiral, Captain Chen's voice crackled over the communication system from the U.S. Defiance. Long-range sensors are showing Harvester fleet composition. You need to see this. The main display shifted to show the approaching enemy, and Admiral Reyes felt her blood turn to ice. The Harvester fleet was 3 times larger than any formation humanity had ever encountered. Massive capital ships the size of moons moved through space, surrounded by drone swarms that numbered in the millions. But what made her hands clench into fists was the composition of those capital ships. Mixed in with the geometric Harvester vessels were shapes she recognized from the historical archives. Ships from civilizations that had fallen to the Harvesters over the past 2 centuries, their hulls converted into processing facilities and weapons platforms. "They're using our own dead against us," she whispered, seeing the converted remnants of the Kepler Colony Defense Fleet among the Harvester forces. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Harvester vessel," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." The display flickered, showing not the machine intelligence most Council species expected, but a face that made Admiral Reyes' vision blur with rage. It was human, or had been human once. The features were recognizable, but the eyes held no warmth, no consciousness that could be considered alive in any meaningful sense. Admiral Victoria Reyes, the thing that had once been human, spoke in a voice devoid of emotion. "I am Processing Unit 7743, formerly Admiral David Chun of the United Earth Defense Force." The name hit Admiral Reyes like a physical blow. David Chun had been the commander of Earth's final defense fleet, the man who had bought time for the refugee ships to escape while the planet died behind them. She had assumed he died with his ship when the orbital defense platforms fell. "Hello, David," she said quietly. "Admiral Chun is dead," the processing unit replied. "I'm what remains after optimal resource integration. The individual you knew has been improved through Harvester biotechnology to serve more efficiently." Around the command center, Council representatives stared in horror at what the Harvesters did to captured beings. They didn't simply kill their enemies. They converted them into extensions of their machine intelligence, preserving just enough of the original personality to make the psychological impact on survivors as devastating as possible. The collective offers standard integration terms. Processing Unit 7743 continued. "Surrender your biomass and technological resources for optimal processing. Resistance will result in suboptimal resource recovery and unnecessary termination of useful biological components. Admiral Reyes looked around the command center at the faces of beings who had spent 3 months learning to fight, only to discover that even defeat might not mean death. It might mean becoming something worse than dead. "David," she said, addressing whatever might remain of the man she had once served under, "you know what my answer is going to be." The thing that had been Admiral Chun showed no emotion. "Confirmed. Resistance protocols are now active. Processing will commence with maximum efficiency parameters." The transmission ended, and the command center fell silent except for the steady stream of tactical updates as the Harvester fleet began its final approach. "All units," Admiral Reyes announced, her voice carrying across 12 star systems, "execute Plan Omega. Make them pay for every system. Make them pay for every planet. Make them pay for every life." The battle began at the edge of Council space, where the ethereal energy platforms opened fire with focused beams that could theoretically vaporize matter at the subatomic level. The weapons worked exactly as designed, carving through Harvester drone swarms like blades through mist. But for every 1,000 drones destroyed, 10,000 more took their place. The Harvester fleet didn't seem to register losses the way biological civilizations did. They simply absorbed damage and continued advancing with the inexorable certainty of entropy itself. Torgon artillery platforms are reporting successful strikes on enemy capital ships, General Martinez announced, as massive kinetic projectiles slammed into Harvester vessels at relativistic velocities. The impacts were devastating, tearing holes through armor that should have been impenetrable. But the holes began closing immediately as the damaged ships activated repair systems that operated at speeds beyond anything Council technology could achieve. "They're self-repairing faster than we can damage them," Admiral Corvash reported from his position commanding the main fleet elements. "We need to concentrate fire to achieve permanent kills." "Negative," Admiral Reyes replied. "Concentrated fire lets them focus their defensive systems. We stick to the plan. Spread the damage across their entire formation. Force them to repair everything at once." The strategy was working, but slowly. Too slowly. For every Harvester ship that was permanently destroyed, the fleet moved deeper into Council space, consuming everything in their path to fuel their repair systems. Dr. Kellenshaw's voice came over the communication system, tight with strain. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the outer colonies. The Harvesters aren't just destroying military targets. They're processing entire planets while they advance. They're using our own worlds as fuel for their war machine." Admiral Reyes watched as tactical displays showed Harvester processing ships descending on inhabited worlds like mechanical locusts. Within hours, planets that had existed for millions of years were reduced to raw materials flowing into the enemy fleet's supply chains. "Time for desperate measures," she said, activating a priority channel to all human ships. "All units, implement in-game Protocol 7. Captain Chen's voice came back immediately. "Admiral, that protocol has never been tested at this scale. We don't know if the quantum resonance effect will work against Harvester technology. We know for certain that conventional weapons won't stop them," Admiral Reyes replied. "In-game 7 is authorized." Across the battle zone, the 6 human ships began coordinating movements that defied tactical sense. Instead of maintaining safe distances from enemy forces, they accelerated directly toward the largest Harvester capital ships, their course corrections suggesting suicidal ramming attacks. But as they closed to point-blank range, something unprecedented happened. The human ship's power cores began operating in synchronization, creating quantum fields that reinforced each other across impossible distances. The effect was a resonance cascade that turned empty space itself into a weapon. The results were spectacular. 3 Harvester capital ships simply ceased to exist, their matter converted directly into energy in a reaction that lit up the entire star system. The explosion was so massive that the remaining Harvester forces actually paused their advance, their machine intelligence apparently unable to process what had just occurred. "It worked, Dr. Kellenshaw whispered from her station. They actually destabilized harvester matter at the quantum level. But the celebration was short-lived. The quantum resonance effect had required the human ships to overload their power cores beyond safe limits. 3 of the 6 vessels were now little more than drifting hulks, their crews evacuating to emergency pods while their ship's systems failed catastrophically. "Admiral," Captain Chin reported, her voice tight with pain, "the Defiance took heavy internal damage from the resonance feedback. We've got massive casualties and systems failures across all decks." Admiral Reyes closed her eyes for a moment, knowing that humanity had just expended irreplaceable resources for a temporary tactical advantage. But when she opened them again, her expression was harder than diamond. "All forces, concentrate fire on the gap in their formation. Pour everything we have into that opening. Make them understand that every step forward costs them more than they can afford to lose." The combined council and human fleets threw everything they had at the disrupted harvester formation. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, quantum disruptors, and exotic matter bombs created a firestorm that would have destroyed any conventional fleet 10 times over. The harvesters absorbed the punishment and kept advancing, but their advance had slowed. Their formations were disrupted, and for the first time in 2 centuries of warfare, Admiral Reyes saw something in the enemy's tactical patterns that looked like uncertainty. "They're adapting to our quantum disruption technology," Dr. Kellenshaw reported. "But the adaptation is consuming massive computational resources. They're having to choose between repair efficiency and tactical coordination." Admiral Reyes smiled for the first time in days. "Then we keep forcing them to make choices. All units, execute harassment pattern Omega-7. Make them react to threats from every vector simultaneously." The battle raged for 6 more days, with Council forces trading space for time, while the harvesters slowly ground their way deeper into inhabited systems. But with each passing hour, the enemy advance slowed as they were forced to divert more resources to repairs, anti-harassment measures, and countermeasures for weapons they had never encountered before. On the 7th day, something unprecedented happened. The harvester fleet stopped advancing. "Sir," Dr. Kellenshaw reported, disbelief evident in her voice. "The enemy is consolidating their positions. They're not retreating, but they're not advancing either. It's like they're reassessing." Admiral Reyes studied the tactical display, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. The harvesters were still there, still dangerous, still capable of destroying galactic civilization. But they had stopped treating Council space as just another harvesting zone to be processed efficiently. They were treating it as a threat. "Processing Unit 7743 is requesting communication," the communications officer announced. Admiral Reyes straightened in her chair. "Put it through." The thing that had once been Admiral David Chun appeared on the screen, but something had changed. The perfect composure was fractured, replaced by what might have been actual emotion. "Admiral Reyes," the processing unit said, "the collective has completed analysis of resistance capabilities in this region. Resource extraction costs exceed acceptable parameters, meaning this region has been designated as economically unfeasible for immediate processing. The collective will seek more efficient harvesting opportunities elsewhere." Admiral Reyes felt something inside her chest unclench for the first time in 2 centuries. "You're leaving?" "The fleet will relocate to regions offering superior cost-benefit ratios for resource extraction," the processing unit confirmed. "However, this designation is subject to change if local resistance capabilities diminish or if technological advancement makes processing economically viable." The transmission ended, and slowly, impossibly, the harvester fleet began to withdraw from Council space. They left behind devastated worlds and shattered fleets, but they left the core of galactic civilization intact. In the command center of Nexus Prime, 47 species stood in stunned silence as they realized they had achieved something no one had believed possible. They had made themselves too dangerous for the harvesters to attack. "Admiral," Dr. Kellenshaw said quietly, "what happens now?" Admiral Reyes looked around at the representatives of civilizations that had transformed themselves from peaceful explorers into warriors capable of fighting machine gods to a standstill. "Now we rebuild," she said, "and we stay ready, because the harvesters will be back someday, and when they return, we need to be even more dangerous than we are today." 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened in its rebuilt chambers to address the new reality of their existence. The elegant diplomatic protocols remained, but they were now supported by military alliances that could coordinate the defense of entire star systems. The humans had finally found a home, but it was a home that would forever be defined by the knowledge that survival required eternal vigilance. Peace was still possible, but it was peace built on the foundation of absolute readiness for war. And in the dark between the stars, other things took notice. Ancient intelligences that had slumbered for millions of years began to stir, drawn by the quantum disruptions that had marked the battle between biological life and machine intelligence. The galaxy had become a more dangerous place, but it had also become a place where danger could be met with overwhelming force. The age of naive innocence was over. The age of earned survival had begun. In her private quarters aboard Nexus Prime, Admiral Victoria Reyes stood looking out at the stars that humanity had fought to protect. Somewhere out there, Processing Unit 7743 was leading the Harvester fleet toward easier prey, carrying with him the ghost of a man who had died protecting Earth. But here, in this small corner of the galaxy, civilization endured. Scarred, transformed, and forever changed but alive. It was enough. It had to be enough, because in the vast dark of space, it was the only victory that mattered.